Are you ready to turn your investments into retirement income? Listen in as Jeremy Keil and his guests reveal ways you can make smarter retirement, investment, and tax planning decisions to achieve your ideal retirement. You will learn more about your money so you can feel better about your money and make better money decisions. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to Retirement Revealed. I'm your host, Jeremy Keil, and we're here to turn your retirement savings into a consistent income. And today we're talking with our guest, Paula Harris. She wrote a book, a journal called Rise Up, a Widow's Journal. And we want to bring her on the show. This is such an important topic, and we're glad you're here. Thanks for coming on, Paula.
Jeremy, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yes, absolutely. Love talking with you and talking with your husband as well, too. For listeners of the show, they might say, wait a second, this Harris last name, that sounds familiar. Well, your husband, Bill, was on just about a year ago talking about the widow's guide to keeping more of her assets. So we'll link to that in the show notes. But I think we saved the best for last. Had you come on second and talk here about your book.
You are one very smart man, Jeremy. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. Well, you wrote this book. It's a journal. And so it's more of a guide, I'd say, versus maybe a telling to here's how you should feel kind of situation. But just tell us about the book and what brought it up.
I'd be delighted to. So first of all, as you said, I do have a husband. When this book first got released, a number of people said to me, I'm so sorry. Did I miss something? Is Bill okay? So this is not a journal. This is not my journal about my own life experiences, but this is a journal to help be a support on the grieving journey for a widow. And it got inspired by actually going to see Jack Canfield a number of years ago. I went to his Breakthrough to Success program. And I knew for a while that I wanted to do something to support the widow environment, because that's who we work with a lot in our practice. And I came up with this idea that I love quotes, inspiring quotes, that if I could take a group of inspiring quotes, put them into chapters, that it would help a widow along her journey. And that's what I did. And I published it last summer. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it's quite a help to the clients you're working with. Both of you work together in your financial practice as financial advisors, and you work a lot with the widows. That's how you came up with first the Widow's Guide to Keeping More of Her Assets. And I think just as important, probably more so beyond even the money part, is how do you, I like what you put down, a place to gather and reflect on your journey, because it's certainly a journey, and there's a lot of ways that you could approach it. And hopefully, thankfully, I think a lot of people are widows for the first time and maybe not the second or third time on there. And so good for you for observing what's helped others and putting it into a package so that people can walk through it as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that acknowledgement.
Sure. Well, and speaking of that, walking through, how does this work for someone that maybe is using this book? How would they even go about approaching it, and what would they use it for?
Sure. We're all unique individuals, so I suspect that everyone will use this in a unique way. I did lay it out in 10 chapters that follow what I would consider and what I've observed as sort of the journey of a widow. You know, starting off with that suddenly single phase, like, oh my gosh, this just happened. How do I navigate it? And then starting to realize, like, wow, grief just kind of overwashes you from time to time, all the time, when you least expect it. And I think a lot of people, until they've had a loss, they expect I could put grief in a neat little package, but they start to realize, oh boy, this has no time frame. I don't know how long it's going to take. And then I sort of worked into the overcoming obstacles. There's the obstacles of, oh my gosh, it's Saturday night. What am I going to do? I live in a coupled world, and I'm not coupled anymore. One woman recently actually said to me on Twitter, she goes, I go to bed really early so I don't need to deal with eating alone. And that really just broke my heart. So there's all these obstacles you come up with. You know, one woman shared with me the obstacle of, oh my gosh, I never thought about that I had to drain the sprinkler system until one day it froze and exploded when it unfroze. All these things that just make the journey so much harder. And then there's a bunch of areas I think that everybody goes through. And I've called these ones faith with wisdom, on love, on gratitude. I did a section on money, being a financial advisor. I thought that was really important because a lot of women, this they've dealt with money, but they've never dealt with money on their own in this type of way. And then so the last two chapters are the moving forward on my own. Like you're starting to see that light, I'm becoming a whole person again. And then the last chapter is called Living Again, because I really do want anyone who's had a loss to realize that they are still able to have a full life. You're never going to forget the loved one, but you will have a full life again if you allow yourself. So that's how the book flows. Some people will go that way. Some people will jump in and out depending on what their mood is that day or the mood for the month, and kind of pop around.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And a lot of people feel that a book is kind of a linear situation. That's maybe more why you did a journal. I like how right at the beginning, well, even before the beginning, right at the beginning is part of it. It says this journal is dedicated to loving memory of, and of course you put in the name there of whoever maybe had passed on to prompt this journey that you're going through. And you say where to start. Step one, look at all the chapters so you get a sense of how the journal flows before you jump in. Step two is start at the beginning or jump in whatever you're drawn to the most. Like choose the path that works best for you. And I think that's an important thing. We were talking earlier that not everyone's grief journey, widow journey is going to be exactly the same. So good for you for just prompting them to understand that if this is your situation, choose the path that's going to work for you. And again, there's no rules. You can use the journal however you want. There's no time frame. It's not like you need to get this done in a certain amount of time. It's not a 40-day journey or something along those lines. You did share with me earlier that it's maybe more like the first 1 to 3 years is the more acute, the in your face situation of widowhood, and you're helping those people in those shoes go through that. But again, it's your own time frame of how it's going to affect you and how you can learn and deal with the situation.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. There's a high profile woman in the state that I live in, and her husband just passed away. She's a former governor of our state, and she's been blogging a lot. And I have found her blogs to just be so raw and real. And she tackled the topic of grief the other day. And she's like, I'm somebody who wants to like wrap it up, put a bow on it. And that's how I just want to deal with things. And I'm finding like, I can't just do that here. Things are just keep coming up. And I think that's one of the things when you're a widow, you have to realize you have to go with the flow sometimes. It's not going to be linear, just like, the book doesn't need to be done linear. The other thing I did with the journal is I didn't put any lines. They're white. The pages are white with inspirational quotes on them. Mm-hmm. And so if somebody just wants to draw pictures that day, they just want to doodle, that's how they want to express themselves. I find lines can be constrictive. And Sure. If you see, 30 lines on a page, you might feel like you have to fill them all. Mm-hmm. If you want to just write 3 words on a page, 1 word on a page, a picture, that may be like the expression. You could actually cut out of a magazine and post and tape a picture, and you can do it in any way that you want, which I like that freedom for people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk a bit about grief, because maybe we're not hearing, I'm assuming and hoping that maybe more people are listening to this who have not experienced the death of a spouse, but they probably have. All of us have gone through where a friend or somebody that we know has had some sort of death in their family, perhaps a spouse. How do people, like, let's just go with me. How do I approach somebody who has suffered such a big loss?
It's a great question, Jeremy. And until you've gotten close to it, you don't really have a good sense. So even though I've dealt in this space a long time, and I've known lots of people that have passed. We just had my brother-in-law passed away last month. So it was the first time that I've really seen death up close as an adult. It's been a long time since a grandmother has passed away. Right. And you first realize that people, they don't know what to do. Nobody knows what to say or do. And for many people, they just back away. And that's probably the worst thing you can do is, I think, remembering to be present. So one of the things, this is a pet peeve of mine. It isn't enough to just say on Facebook, so sorry, someone shares that they've lost a loved one, and you see like people will just put little praying hands, or they literally will just write, so sorry for your loss. It doesn't, for the person who's lost someone, that's pretty empty. I mean, yes, in our world, it's nice to get some acknowledgement like that, but that people think that's all they need to do. But really, reaching out with a phone call, a card, stopping by is so much more important. I'll tell you, I'm a big card writer. I think we've received probably 10 or 12 cards on the passing of my brother-in-law. Other family members have obviously received as well, but that's not a lot. So when you're thinking about how you support someone, something as simple as a card makes a big difference. And I know for a lot of people, they don't know what to say. Most people who've had a loss will tell you one of the hardest things for them to hear is, "I'm so sorry." And often the person who hears that says, "You're sorry? I lost my spouse.
Right.
How can you be more sorry than I am?" So, I studied with the woman, Amy Florian of Core Genius, and she's, on a mission to get us to stop saying, I'm so sorry, because it really feels very empty and hollow to the person who receives it. So even just saying, "I have no words," is a better way. "Please accept my sympathies. I'm acknowledging that you've lost your spouse." Share a memory about that person. That's a great way. Don't remember to keep saying their name. That's a really big deal. Actually, this coming weekend is the anniversary of a friend of mine who was in his 80s when he passed. And I'm going to go to the memorial mass with his wife, and then I offer to take her to dinner. Those are the things that matter, because I know her children don't live anywhere nearby and they won't be around. I don't want her to be alone that day.
Yeah.
So we're going to go out to eat.
Oh, that's a great way to show your support. And you mentioned even earlier something to me about flowers, that flowers can actually be a burden to the people that receive them. You think, it's nice to have some beauty around in that time frame and things like that. But, all of a sudden you got all this stuff to deal with. You're newly widowed and you think, I've got to water these plants. Like, what's your take on that?
So, I remember going to a friend's house after her husband passed, and it was about 1.5 years ago, and the house was full of flowers. It was so full. She's like, "This reminds me of being in the funeral home."
Sure.
Which was not necessarily a good feeling. And then even just the flowers we had after my brother-in-law passed, it was like they start to die and they don't smell good. It's like, it's something else that you have to deal with. It's another form of death. So as much as people think that's something helpful to do, right away, it's not as helpful. Maybe you could do something a little bit later that involves flowers, but initially that can be a little bit of a stressor for people. So you can think about, something like the journal. It doesn't have to be used at any time. You could just bring them some note cards. Often people have to write a lot of cards and thank you for people who have sent gifts. The other thing is you have to be careful you don't overwhelm them with the brigade of food. Everybody shows up in the first, 7 to 10 days with food, but then everybody goes back to their life and they forget that home cooked meal might be a really nice thing to do a month in, 2 months in. So kind of spreading out those ideas, dropping cards. I've had friends tell me that just even a text that says, "I'm thinking of you," a little heart text, it makes the person realize they're not alone. So getting creative of ways to keep in touch. Keeping in touch is really the big thing.
It's Jeremy Keil here, and I know you're listening to the Retirement Reveal podcast because you want to learn more about making great retirement decisions. I've created a free video course for you to do just that. Head over to 5stepretirementplan.com and sign up to receive this video training right in your email inbox. We broke down our 5-step retirement plan into bite-sized videos so you can get started on the retirement, investment, and tax planning you need to create a consistent retirement income. Go to 5stepretirementplan.com, use the number or spell it out. You'll get there either way. 5stepretirementplan.com. Thanks for listening. And now for the rest of the show. Yeah, absolutely. I like when you reminded me earlier about how flowers can be a burden. My wife cannot stand flowers, and people talk about, oh, it's her birthday or it's Valentine's Day, you're gonna get her flowers, and I was like, no, because that is the last thing she wants, and it's literally because she hates the idea that flowers die, like cut flowers die, and that's just not. And she hasn't gone through any large losses to trigger those memories, but imagine down the road, that could be a big situation. That this is just not the best way to express, a comforting feeling. But you also mentioned too that, and she tells me this all the time, she's a school counselor, so she's definitely more in tune to different situations where empathy is really needed. And she talks about how mean, somebody dies or something big happens, it's almost like you're famous for a week or two. Like
Yeah.
you're top of everyone's mind. And then you're just exactly the opposite. And all that attention for a week or two kind of helps you maybe get through it. And then all of a sudden you're lonelier than you were even 3 weeks earlier. So following up like a month after someone passes is one of the biggest, most important things you can do. My wife tells me, because that's a time when you're feeling almost abandoned. Everyone was, you're famous for a week or two, and then a month later you're abandoned and you're feeling lonely again.
I think that's really great advice. That she's obviously very good at her job.
Yeah, she is for sure.
Yeah. Well, one thing we did do actually, instead of sending flowers to the funeral, we bought a set of plants. I got a plant basket, and then I gave each one of the family members one of the plants so they could, be remind, because as a family you really do have to have something there. But hopefully people seem to appreciate getting that, and we'll see how it goes in a couple of months if the plants are still alive.
Right. Yeah, a good time to try your best and do a bit of an experimental study to see how people and care about how they feel about it. We'll find out. Good. Well, there's I'm going to talk about a couple of the chapters that you have in the book. Again, it's 10 chapters, 10 different things that you're approaching and encouraging people to go through. It doesn't have to be in any particular order, but you mentioned you're taking this friend of yours, you're taking her to the memorial mass for her deceased husband. Tell me about how her faith, or maybe just faith in general, plays into the widow journey.
Oh, that's a great question. In this case, her husband and I both went to Providence College, and we connected through our local church, and we would all go to the same mass, and I would often sit in front of them when I lectured. So our bond really had a lot to do with our faith. I have found when people have a strong faith life, they are able to handle grief in a much, I'll say, easier way. Because when you have that trust in knowing that you're going to be taken care of, life is just a little bit more simple. You know that you can lean on God and He will take care of you. So the chapter on faith has has some scripture quotes, but it also has the theme of hope a lot. And I find when people have a strong faith life, there's the hope. I actually went to a funeral a couple of weeks ago, and the woman had been diagnosed 21 years before with multiple myeloma and was told she would only live like a year, and she lived 21 years. So at this point, she was actually excited to die because she was going to be reunited with all of her loved ones, and she was going to be at her eternal rest. And her faith was so strong that it brought her family joy to know she was going to be okay, which then made them okay with her passing. And it was one of the most beautiful funerals I had been to, and the homily, and just that faith and hope and eternal rest just wove through. And I find that when people have that faith life, it makes the journey just that little bit easier, because you have the Lord to lean on. You're not alone. You're never alone at that point.
That's absolutely important for sure. And another important piece of the widow, I think we're going to call it the widow journey at this point. We're just going to stick to that for right now. But another piece of that is kind of what do you deal with the aftermath, almost in terms of, am I going to be okay? Like how does the money look like? And I know you're a financial advisor. I am too. And a lot of the people that are going through the widow journey are 55 plus. And it's not quite fully there, especially for that demographic where the males and the females take a separate or a similar tactic towards money. I definitely see where you got the 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds where it's more of a equal attention to the money. But I find so many times when I'm talking to, it's becoming better about it, but I'm talking to a couple, and a lot of times it's the wife just chooses not to be involved in the money. It's not that the husband even takes it over. It's a lot of times that the wife is not involved by her choice. And then all of a sudden, statistically, she's going to be 100% involved with that. How do people that are facing that situation go through things?
Oh my gosh, Jeremy, that's just a great point. And I'm going to just read a quote quickly from the book. That's my favorite one that I use with women because I'm right in that demographic of, the average age of widowhood is 59, and that shocks people. So I'm always trying to motivate women to pay attention. So that Barbara Stanny has this great quote: Prince Charmings leave, Prince Charmings die. Prince Charmings aren't always great money managers. Your job is to participate in financial decisions from a place of knowledge, not fear, ignorance, or habit. And I think you're absolutely right. Too many women sort of put the blinders on and think everything's okay. So, when or if this day happens, it is kind of shocking. Like I have to figure out how to manage the household on my own. Some recent people that I can think of, they haven't been working. Some may have not worked in many years as they raise their kids. Well, where's the money going to come from? That's usually a big one. Am I going to be okay? Where am I going to get the money? And hopefully people have planned well and that there would be a life insurance policy, but sometimes there isn't. And then how do you navigate? Okay, what bills do we have? What do I need to cut out? What do I, maybe need to add in? And I'm sure you've used this advice as well. No major financial decisions for a year.
Yes.
Obviously, as we call it, if there's something on fire, you need to address it. Like, you need to get paperwork filed. You need to get the final tax return done. You need to get the estate plan in order, but you don't need to make a decision on selling the house or moving. And usually those decisions are way too emotional. The woman is in what's called grief fog and often won't even remember things she did or said for anywhere from 6 months, 9 months. Everybody's a little bit different in that. So it's really trying to get her into a decision-free zone. Let's not tackle this now. Tackle what has to be done, but be slow and deliberate. And from the investment side, typically you don't have to do anything right away. You may have to retitle some assets, but you don't have to buy or sell things. And so kind of keeping things as calm as possible, I think, is a big deal. And the other big thing is getting a handle on cash flow. Women often have a good sense of the general cash flow, like what's coming in, going out, but it's the investments that kind of trip up a lot of women. And I keep trying to explain that just keep it basic. Don't get overthinking it. Having help on that front can be really valuable, but don't overthink it and make it harder than it needs to be.
Right. And becoming a widow or widower, being widowed can happen at literally any moment, at any moment at all. And when you're younger, I think the best protection is to have the life insurance. I think the best preparation is to be involved in the financial decisions and knowing what's going on there. But both you and I deal with a lot of people that are planning to retire, and there's a lot of stick your head in the sand kind of attitude. And it's so interesting, especially where the average widow's widowed for like 5 to 8 years. I see somewhere around there all the time. You talk to a lot of people and they're thinking how long their retirement might last. I hear this from a lot of people that's maybe 20 years. We can debate that that's probably a little bit light, but let's just go with that. Let's just pretend your retirement's 20 years. If you're widowed for 5 to 8 years of that, that's at least a quarter, a third, might even be a half of your retirement that you're widowed. And when you're planning for retirement, preparing for the widowhood is such a huge, big piece of it. And I like to say a lot of times that 92-year-old women are living off the decisions of their dead husband when he was 62. And
it's such a great line. I love that.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And a lot of those decisions at 62 are perhaps made by the husband and most likely are not being thought of. How do we help that 92-year-old woman? Because that's important. It's likely to happen. What you got to go into retirement planning for. There's two of you went in at one point. One of you is going to be the only one left. What are these decisions at 62 often that are going to best prepare and get people ready for that situation? It's a reality, and it's a very likelihood where it's a very long amount of time.
It's so true. And I'll call it the softer side of things you need to think about, but they're still, related to hard assets. What type of house you're going to live in. I mean, if you're still living in a 4,000 square foot house in your 80s, that's going to be a real burden for the person who still has to maintain it, both physically and financially. It's going to be a big drain. So, knowing when to make hard decisions of downsizing, or, making sure that you have all your estate plan in order. Where do you want your final wishes? Where do you want to be buried? These are really hard discussions to have for couples. But, do you want to have a religious service? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want your ashes buried in the ground or scattered somewhere? All these types of decisions are really important, and you don't want to leave them to the widow or widower who's in their grief trying to figure this out and trying to honor their deceased loved one, but balancing. Frankly, there's a huge financial, outlay that happens with a funeral. Are you prepared for that? Are you emotionally prepared, financially prepared? There's just so many moving pieces that you don't want to figure those things out when you have 3 or 4 days to do that.
Yeah. That was something you told me earlier. Just imagine one of the best gifts you can give is the gift of preparedness. If there's 2 of you, you're preparing the other one for this. It's like a 2 or 3 day window that, boom, you make huge life-changing decisions a lot of times in that window. And if you're already prepared ahead of time, there's a lot less. It's tough enough right now to talk about it, but you don't have the emotion of somebody just having passed away in the last 36 hours in there. And whether you're planning that out for your future widow or you're planning out for even your kids, that gift of preparedness is one of the best things you can do for the people that you're loving and taking care of.
I would agree. It's just so important. And especially where I think children aren't aligned as much with their parents, at least from a faith-based perspective. You see less children going to church where the parents did, and they don't know what mom or dad might have wanted. And if mom or dad didn't put it in writing, you could have a big snafu, when they would have wanted to be buried in the church and the children decide not to do that. There's a lot of things that you need to prepare for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've been talking quite a bit about the widow's journey, and you specifically use the term widow to focus on empowering women that are going through this. And it happens more often to the ladies than it does to the husbands. So I'm going to encourage everyone to check out the Rise Up a Widow's Journal. We're going to have the link to that in the show notes. But you dropped a little bit in from Ami earlier that you're maybe going to write another book. Is that true?
Yes, I'm getting a lot of encouragement. People who've picked it up and saying, geez, I would really love to send this to my widower friend. Is this appropriate? Or I have a friend who just lost a child or a sibling. I even had one woman said to me, I could see how this could be helpful for someone who lost a pet, because there's so much grief in losing a loved one that you need a place to put it. And I'm gonna update it. The chapter on money may come out because it may not be as important in some of those other situations. But I'm excited to get another version of this Rise Up journal out. Yeah,
well, definitely. Well, I appreciate you putting this together. There's a lot of people that are going to be benefited by having a way to process their grief. We like the idea of having a process for decision making. In our world, we're helping people make retirement decisions. So we created a process for that. I know you take your clients through a process, and thankfully and hopefully, again, you're not widowed more than once in your lifetime, and you've never planned for this before. You never prepared for it, and just having a guide, having a process for this situation is just going to be so helpful to people. So thank you for putting that all together.
My pleasure. Thank you for acknowledging it.
Great. Well, Paula, thanks for coming on the show. I'm so happy that you could be here sharing your book with people. I imagine a lot of people are going to get a lot of benefit from going through the guide.
I'm grateful, and it was my honor. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you too to our listeners for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast. We believe if you know more about your money, you will feel better about your money, and you will make better money decisions.
Thank you for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast. Click on the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit retirement-revealed.com to learn more. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Keil Financial Partners. Keil Financial Partners does not provide legal, accounting, or tax advice. Consult your attorney or tax professional. Representatives have general knowledge of the Social Security tenets. For complete details on your situation, contact the Social Security Administration. Keil Financial Partners is a part of the Thrivent Advisor Network, a registered investment advisor. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.